Welcome everybody to Future Baseball GM's YouTube channel. Today I would like to welcome Giovanni Hernandez. He's the Assistant Director for International Scouting for the Los Angeles Angels. Thank you, Giovanni, for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Awesome. Yeah. So just to start off for our listeners, can you kind of explain, a little bit more about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So basically started at Stanford University, Birmingham, Alabama, not to be confused with Stanford University out in California. Studied business management there. Wasn't really sure where I was going to take things. At the time, it wasn't a really well-known thing, baseball operations. To be honest, I was probably a little bit naive. While I was in college in '05, the book Moneyball came out, and that kind of opened some eyes. And, you start seeing, hey, these are some guys that maybe weren't former players, right? Because everything was you had to be a player. And I played up to high school. I was more of a tennis player. I was better at tennis than baseball. So I stopped playing, relatively young in comparison to a lot of people in the industry. But reading that book, getting to know some people, I said, man, this is kind of interesting. Like I never realized I could work in baseball. So I ended up applying for an internship with the Braves. I had been working in sports throughout college, so I had my resume built up. Being bilingual was massive in that. The Braves were very adamant that the bilingual piece of it was a big part of me getting that internship in the door. But it was a PR internship, got me there, and got to get down in the clubhouse, did some translating for players, and really exposed me to kind of baseball operations behind the scenes and what's going on, and made some connections there. Went on to St. Thomas University for my master's degree. Specifically chose St. Thomas for their alumni base. Al Avila was a coach there and an alum of St. Thomas University at the time. While I was going there, he was assistant GM of the Tigers, and just got lucky, man. It all worked out how I would hoped. Al found out who I was, or there were some connections there from the program, letting them know, hey, we have a bilingual kid here that wants to get into baseball operations. Al happened to have an internship slot open. He got me in touch with Tom Moore, a Springfield alum, as you are.
Yep.
And Tom Moore gave me an opportunity, and the rest is history, as they say. So started with the Tigers, was there 5 years. I got to experience a World Series in 2012. It sucked because we lost in 4, but just the opportunity of being able to go and experience that, while being part of a club was really neat. Left the Tigers in 2013 to go work for Major League Baseball. When people ask me, oh, why'd you go work for Major League Baseball, man? They came and actually asked permission for me. That was never part of my plan. I always wanted to be with the team and compete, but Kim Ng and Chris Haydock were awesome to me there. They brought me in, basically recruited me. For those that don't know, with baseball, you can't just openly campaign for positions. There is a tampering policy in place. I can't just call the Yankees tomorrow and say, hey, I want to come work for you. That's totally against the rules. So even with Major League Baseball, they fall under the same guidelines. So when that all happened, they actually reached out to the Tigers and asked permission for me. And you got to understand, at the time, I'm 26, 27 years old, don't have a ton of experience in the game. And I'm wondering, what does MLB want with me? But in essence, they were just looking for, again, bilingual, being clutch again, someone that had done international, a good administrator. At the Tigers, we prided ourselves in always following the rules, never had any violations while I was there. So, they brought me into MLB. My then girlfriend, soon to be fiance, now wife, moved up there with me. And we made New York home for 5, and then joined the Angels at the beginning of last year. So it's been a fun ride, moving all over the place. Now back down in Miami, doing international scouting again on the club side, which is, kind of what the initial goal was. And we're back to doing what I love. So that's how we got to today.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear for our listeners, and congratulations on getting engaged and soon to be married.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, that was then. No, we're married with 2 kids now. I mean, at the time when we took the
gotcha.
MLB,
Sounds good.
A lot of things that happened at once in 2013. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, misunderstood there.
Yeah,
But no, that's all good. But yeah, no, those guys, I'm sure your experience with the Tigers was awesome, and I could attest to that from my experience. And can you speak a little bit more about the program at St. Thomas? Because I know it's an up and coming, it's a top tier program for people who want to not only get in baseball but the sports industry in general due to the resources that they have. Can you explain a little bit more to our listeners about your time there and how you built that relationship with Al Avila?
Yeah, so a master's degree it's not really a requirement for baseball. Now you've got all these people with analytics degrees and that's a whole different animal. But in terms of just a master's degree or an MBA for what I do, it's not necessary at all. And what I've told job seekers in the past is that your master's degree is more just opening up networking opportunities, right? And with St. Thomas, I had someone that had been to St. Thomas, that had gone to Stanford, one of these, these people that got put in my life, for a purpose, I guess you could say. And he just said, look, I went to St. Thomas because they have internships with all these different teams in Miami. The network is massive. Al went there. Paul Maneri, who's the head coach at LSU, went there. Louis Howell, who's like senior VP with the Cubs, went there. Like they've got a big base of people. And as is anything in this industry, right? Like you've got this mass influx of Ivy League kids now, and everyone's like, oh, you got to go to Ivy League school. So, well, they're going to look out for each other, just like you would with Springfield kids, right? Matt Ferry's going to talk to you. Tom Moore's going to talk to you because you went to Springfield like they did. So it's no different with anywhere else. So that was one of the main reasons. Miami was somewhere I wanted to be. I had an uncle that lived down here, and it just made sense for me to come for school, and thankfully it ended up working out that way. But really, it's just a network of people. I'm not going to say that St. Thomas's education is 100 times better than anyone else's, and that's why you got to come here. No, it just opens up doors, just like any school. Ohio University has tons of connections, in the college administration. UMass Amherst, everybody's heard about them and their pipeline. So really the education component of it is secondary, in my opinion, to the networking opportunity. So if you go to one of these schools, research why you're going there and who you're going to be connected with or what programs it's going to open doors to more than anything else, I would say.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. For sure. I heard a lot of good things, but there are a lot of other programs out there. And something I think we hear a lot, I'm sure you've heard a lot, which is not something you want to necessarily hear, but everyone says that they want to work in baseball, right? And like, why, first off, like, why did you want to work in baseball? And then on the other hand, like, for, in terms of job seekers, can you explain to them the importance of not, of being, holistic with an answer like that, not just saying, oh, I'm passionate?
Yeah, I mean, we're all passionate, right? You wouldn't be doing it if you weren't passionate. Like no one's going to a baseball job interview and say, well, I'm just looking for a job and I figured I'd show up, right? So
Yeah.
it's not that there's anything wrong with saying that. I think it's just understood, right? Like if you've made it to that point where you're sitting in front of me and we're talking about it, like I get it, you're passionate, but what else, right? To answer your first question, how I knew that's what I wanted to do, I didn't until college because I didn't know it was an option. Like it just, now it's very mainstream. So I feel like kids at 13, 14, 15 know what they want to do. At the time, that wasn't a thing yet. So what I ended up realizing growing up is that I was basically grooming myself for this without knowing it. And what I mean by that is like, and we joke about it all the time, man, because I come up with ideas a lot in our meetings now. You can ask my boss, like, I come up with ideas based off of video games. And I know it sounds crazy, but I grew up playing a ton of baseball video games, but I didn't like playing the video game. I liked building teams and simulating and seeing if they could win, which in essence is being a GM. But when you're 13 years old, I don't know. Like I just,
Yeah.
it was fun, right? It was fun trading players. It was fun putting guys that I wanted on one team. Like me being Puerto Rican, putting Robbie Alomar and Pudge and Juan Gonzalez all on the same team. Like that was cool to me. I had no idea that was a career choice until, much later when I was in college. So I kind of always grew up wanting to do that, and it wasn't until Stanford that I realized, holy crap, like this is a career choice. Like it was really exciting to me, and that's kind of how it took off. But the second part, other than saying you're passionate, just be honest with yourself and what your story is. Don't just say that. Hey, tell me why. One of the people that I work with at MLB, she's a very high-ranking female, one of my best friends in the industry, and she grew up going to Orioles games with her dad. Like that's cool. Like talk about that kind of stuff. Hey, I grew up going to Orioles games with my family. Cal Ripken was my favorite player. Like I get it. You're showing me your passion without having to just say, well, I'm passionate about baseball. Well, yeah, you and everybody else. But what is your unique story? Tell me about you. Because really, what I'm looking for, when I'm trying to hire somebody, a lot of times is fit. Do I think this person fits? Are they filling a need that we don't have? And when I say fit, I don't mean be like me. I mean, do I think this person brings something that I don't bring to the table? So, hearing background and hearing where you're from, like that stuff is really helpful. So I would think, for anybody trying to get in, that's one of the things that I would say focus on your story and how you can fit that in without sounding generic, make it sound unique to yourself. So.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And for the way I kind of go about it, I'm not going to explain in full detail because I don't want to give my story away. But for me, like I think kind of like how you think, like I want to, it was kind of like sophomore year. going to junior college was like, okay, baseball operations, player development, that's something I want to do. So the reasoning because of that is the reason why I want to do is because like I'm like you, I want to build a team that can compete for championships year after year. And that all starts with player development. And through my prior experiences, like being able to just see that process and how guys are developing in the minor leagues has really been driving me every single day to continue to learn and hone in on my skills with R, SQL, Python,
Mhm.
Spanish, coaching. So for me, like I've been trying to broaden my horizons, like do things that I'm not comfortable with. This way, like I can become more comfortable with being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. And
Sure.
I think that's a big thing for like our listeners to understand. And, everyone wants to work with an MLB club. And I think, before they do that, they need to realize like kind of like you're saying, be true to yourself, like realizing where they're at in their life and what they need to do to get there. Like, if you could maybe explain to our listeners, like kind of, yes, everyone wants to work with an MLB club, but
Mhm.
my idea is like this is just going to happen. Like for me, my opportunities with the Orioles and the Tigers just didn't come, right? Like I
Yeah.
did a lot of work before then. So if you can kind of explain to our listeners, like maybe the mental side of that, because I think sometimes like they don't really think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. I'm using another person as an example because I think some of these real world stories are more helpful. I have two of them actually. The first one talking about what you're telling me about, right? So I get a resume from somebody. I'm looking to hire them as an intern for me. This is still with the Tigers, and I look at his resume and it says Social Security office for 3 or 4 years, and then it says Tri City Valley Cats intern, right? And bilingual kid, had played college ball, went to Manhattan. You may know. I don't want to say any names, but
Yeah.
so I'm looking at it. I'm like, this is interesting. So I call him up. He and I are the same age. So it's weird. I'm interviewing somebody my age at the time. And I sit down. I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? And he just goes, look, being honest with you, life happens. I finished playing ball. I got married to my, college sweetheart. And I had to get a job. I had to work. I couldn't afford an internship, but I did the Social Security office for, I think it was 2 or 3 years. And then I told my wife, this is what I want to do. I left and did an internship in Tri City Valley. I was the mascot. I did everything, but this is, baseball is what I want to get into. And that, I was like, damn, like, this guy, he's worked a real job. He left it to go be an intern. Like I want to give this guy a chance. And I told my boss, I was like, man, like this guy shows me he wants it. And, he could have easily turned down that Tri City Valley Cats job and be like, oh no, I'm above this. I'm already making decent money at the Social Security office. But no, like he gave up a real job to go do that. And I don't recommend people leaving jobs. I'm just trying to give an example that you're not always going to get in the first way you think, or you're not just going to jump in with the Tigers day one. But to this person's credit, he's now the assistant director of scouting over with the Tigers, and he's worked his way up. He fought and he did what he had to, and he got in. And then the second one I'll tell you about is another good friend of mine who wanted to work in player development, had a tough time getting in, took a ticket sales job. He did ticket sales for like 5, 6 years, always pushing, trying to get in. And sure enough, he eventually got into player development. So, what I'm saying is that you can make it. It's not going to necessarily be tomorrow. It may not be in 2 years, may not be in five, but if you really want to and you push and you know how to deal with people, like eventually you're going to get an opportunity. So that would be kind of my recommendation on that. And I've seen it. Those are two real world stories. Those aren't BS. Like I know both of those guys are friends of mine. So it can happen. And then I got fortunate. I did my one internship. I got in the door and I was off. Those are three totally different examples of how to get in the door. So you just have to be flexible and you have to persevere. And COVID's happening now, and that's throwing a wrench into everything. And we're going through it. I'm going through it, and
Yeah.
you just make the best of it, really, and just keep kind of grinding, moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, for our listeners, sometimes we think about, and you've heard this as well, like people, job seekers, they always want that full-time job. They're looking for that full-time job. And, I think,
Hmm.
from what I learned is like, it's about being patient with the process. And that's what I really realized. Like I've done a lot of internships to this point, right?
Hmm.
And, but I still keep grinding and keep going because I know when opportunity presents itself, like then and should a door open, then I'll be available. But till that point, I need to keep working and honing my skills until that right opportunity comes across. And I think it's just like it's an important thing for job seekers, not only myself, but others that are listening. I think it's important for them to realize like a full-time job is not just going to happen. It's not,
Mhm.
there's more, I think you said this at the winter meetings, there's more people that apply to these positions than positions available.
Oh yeah,
And
100%.
and that's 100%, yeah, that's true. And I think it's about, diversifying yourself and differentiating yourself. And that's, people ask me, what are you doing with R, SQL? What do you do? People are asking me
Mhm.
now, and I don't know it all. Like I work really hard, and that's kind of what I do,
Mhm.
and kind of to bounce off of that. But with your current role with the Angels, can you describe to our listeners exactly what it is you do, and like kind of maybe a day-to-day schedule, when things were normal?
Yeah, yeah. Day-to-day schedule now consists of conference calls.
Yeah.
So basically, assistant director of scouting. I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. So we're, Carlos Gomez is our director of international scouting. I knew him from my time having worked at MLB. He and I worked together. At the commissioner's office, you work with all 30 clubs. So he and I had gotten to know each other and built a relationship, and that's kind of how that all started. So when I came over, um, basically just overseeing our scouts. We got I want to say our department's 15. We got 12 or 13 scouts all over the world: Curacao, Panama, Venezuela, Dominican Republic. Um, just kind of spread out all over the place. And we just keep tabs on them, keep prep lists of all the players internationally for the upcoming class, for future classes, make sure they're writing their reports, people are meeting quotas. They post videos. We follow up on the videos. If there's players we like, we mention them. We bring them up. Hey, my big thing is having conviction, and that's one of the big things we push. And it's hard with international because with the amateur side of things, like you've already got a guide. Like, put it this way, I don't do amateur scouting, and I'm pretty sure I could have hit on about 15 to 20 of the first rounders just because there's so much information out there, right? Not because I know more than anybody else, but hell, Baseball America's got a top 30, MLB.com's got, everybody's got their top 30 in their opinion. Internationally, good luck. You
Yeah.
basically have Ben Badler, who does a really good job for Baseball America. I know Ben, and he does really well at getting information. So Ben has a pretty solid idea of what he's talking about. Baseball America does theirs. Jesse Sanchez does pretty good with MLB.com, but even then, they don't know everything. They know maybe I'll say they probably know 20 to 30 players. 800 sign a year.
Yeah.
So that other 750 they don't know. So what I'm saying is, like, our scouts, you really rely on the area guys a lot because they're flying blind. They'll see a player and there's no, Ben Badler's not there telling him if he's good or not. He doesn't know if Baseball America likes him. It's not like Heston Jerstad's like cranking balls for Arkansas. Everybody knows who that is. Well,
Yeah.
in the Dominican, it's possible we've signed players that we just flat out beat other teams to. And it happens
Yeah.
every, right? Like a kid will show up and you're like, who the hell's this kid? And, we do our work and we sign him, and then other teams are, hey, who is that guy? We never saw him. So your area guys are massive. So going back to the conviction piece, a big part of it is, hey man, if you see something you like, or you see a kid, like, don't, have no shame, bring him. If we don't like him, we don't like him. And, we'll say that, but like, have conviction on a guy. And that goes to everyone, right? Area scouts in the US and, international. And even for us, having conviction, like when you're going to pull the trigger on a guy for a lot of money, like you better be sure. You might end up being wrong, but you need to have conviction on what it is that you saw and why it is that you're recommending that guy. And for me, that's one of the bigger pieces, is not being afraid to speak your mind and having the conviction. Because if you're wishy-washy and you're like, oh yeah, he can hit. Well, I mean, he might hit, he might not. Well, he hadn't, obviously, pretty much
Yeah.
everybody might or might not. Then
Yeah.
why do you think he is the guy that's going to hit? And then let's kind of go off of that. So.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so that's that. As day to day, you get on a plane on a Monday morning or a Sunday night, spend a week in the Dominican Republic, go back on Friday, see my wife and kids, and rinse and repeat, and go back the next Monday. They're to, Venezuela, not so much now, but Panama, Colombia, a lot of Venezuelan showcases in Colombia. So a lot of travel, about 200 days a year on the road. But I love it. My wife understands it. She met me once I was in baseball, so thankfully she's supportive, and it's worked out up to now. But there's no better feeling, man. Like you go out there, you scout, you pick out that kid, you think he's going to be a guy, and then you see him perform, man. And it's a cool feeling, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of leads me to my next point. Like, you're working a lot. People don't understand like how the grind baseball really is, and what it really entails. And in terms of work-life balance, could you briefly describe, like, to our listeners, because I had to learn it myself, in college,
Mhm.
and make it more of my lifestyle. And for you, be having experience in the industry, can you explain how? Because I think a lot of our listeners want to, they want to get into the industry and they want to work in it,
Mhm.
but they just don't know how to balance their life between, socially, personally, and, and all the emotions that come with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not 9 to 5.
Yeah, no.
No, it's a grind. It's a long-term grind. Now, we're very lucky that, again, Carlos is awesome as a boss because we value the family life and that work-life balance. And if I have a trip coming up next week, but suddenly one of my kids gets sick, or I have a big thing that I need to do with my wife, like that's it. Trip's canceled. Go do your family stuff, right? If you're not, we always say if you're not right at home, you're not going to be right on the road.
Yeah.
And thankfully, that's how the Angels operate. And I can't speak to other organizations, so I don't want to say that all organizations are like that or aren't like that, but at least we are, and that's big for me. And I've had one or two situations where I've had to take a day, or a scout has called in and said, "Hey, man, my wife's going through something. I can't go. Hey, to go." Like,
Yeah.
well, with international being open market, like if we miss a guy, that's fine. There's another 750 to come. They
Yeah.
don't spread over the one guy. We'll keep going and we'll keep grinding. But it's hard, man. And for scouts, like I said, I'm on the road. It's international. I'm out of the country. It's going through airports, swiping passports. Like, that had a trip, went 2 weeks out to Korea to cover the under 18s, and like a typhoon's coming there. So I'm like trying to get a flight through Seoul to get out of there to get back, trying to call my wife, but it's 1 in the morning, even though it's, 1 in the afternoon in Korea. Like little things like that, man, that are tough, not sleeping in your bed every night. Now, with that said, it's the benefits outweigh those for me personally, but I've seen people that after a year or two, they're like, no, man, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm not, this isn't for me. And that's fine. There's some people that are better suited for being, in the big league office and working, long hours, but being in the same city and sleeping in their own bed, right? There's some of us that I like that I'm not in LA per se, right? Because I don't have to be on the road 200 days and then go in the office, right? When I'm home, I'm home. Or I'm with my family and my kids. So when I get my week off, hey, I'm home for 9 days. So like that's nice, man. So a weekend, 5 days, and another weekend, like I'd argue that's better than having a 9 to 5 job. But, then you also have to weigh that there's another 15, 20 days that you're out. So, it all depends on the person, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, I can attest to that. Like in terms of my prior experience, my first experience in baseball was working with the Greensboro Grasshoppers in
Mhm.
ticket sales. And that was my first time where I really realized, like, I kind of got the experience of the hours. And it wasn't baseball operations, but it was still that day-to-day grind of working 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days
Mhm.
a week, and even a few weeks without a day off. And then
Yeah.
transition to when I worked with the Tigers this last few months, and then the Orioles. The Orioles was, I kind of knew what I was going into, and working, and then I also traveled with the Orioles, so I was in Single A Delmarva, and though it's just a consistent grind. The first month of the season, 3 weeks without a day off, and 12 to 15-hour days. You're
Mhm.
consistently communicating with players and coaches, and you have to be on your A game every single day, locked in, and you have to, you're a resource for them. And I think, that's what I try to tell to others, that like it's not your normal 9 to 5. It's a grind every day. You need to be mentally, physically focused, whatever, and be alert at all times, and just make sure you're communicating properly with everybody. Because I think communicating and being open-minded is something today in our industry that's a must.
Yeah.
And I think because, like I was mentioning before, people just expect a full-time job. They expect things where reality is that's not how it works. And
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is, if you're closed-minded, you're going to be out real quick. If you're open-minded, you're going to see the whole picture. And I think during this COVID time for all of us, even for myself, it's, I'm an open-minded person, but it's even like broadened the horizons and really allowed me to think like full picture.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, with that being said, in your role, in international scouting, as we know, they're going to have an international draft coming up within the next year or so. And so what's your opinion on that? But also, maybe if we could take a step back, can you walk us through like the July 2nd, the international signing day, and kind of in general terms, like maybe
Yeah.
how that process is, or because I think sometimes, like, a lot of guys focus on amateur scouting, but
Mhm.
and people don't really realize the international scouting side and how much effort is put into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of July 2nd's like, it's more about like the kids, and it's really just the opening of the signing period, right? Like there's nothing, you don't have to actually do anything on July 2nd. I think that's a big misconception. I think a lot of people think that every international kid signs July 2nd. And that's not accurate. You'll see a lot of big bonuses and like the prime kids that they'll sign on that day, but for the most part, the rest of the market ends up signing later into July, even into the following year. Even June of the next year. So the signing period as of now, right? If the draft comes, and this year the signing period is all sorts of out of whack without getting into that too much. But normally it's July 2nd to June 15th. That's normally how it works. So you'll have kids sign all the way through June. But for that handful of kids that you do sign, you bring them in and they sign and they put their jerseys on, and we do that with every kid that signs throughout the year. Just July 2nd, since it's the first day, you might get 2 or 3 that do it that day, so it's a little bit bigger deal. But yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing with July 2nd. It's just the opening of the period. And then if a kid hasn't turned 16 yet, he can't sign that day anyways. So kids that are born, let's say July 20th, aren't eligible to sign until their 16th birthday on July 20th. So that's why, you'll get some kids who are like, oh, I thought that guy was going to sign on July 2nd. How come he hasn't signed? And people are panicking. Like, dude, his birthday is July 20th. He can't sign yet. So I've seen that happen once or twice with some top players where people start to panic. And, it's cool, man, in terms of, there's blogs out there and fan pages, and people are following this stuff now. Like, it's really neat. When I first got in, that wasn't a thing. And now, I remember even with the Tigers, there would be like fan threads. They're like, who do you think's going to start at third base in the DSL? I'm like, Jesus, like, give it a second. Like, these kids are 17 years old, man. Like, don't worry about who's starting at third base. They're just trying to learn to play baseball. So, but it's neat to see that, the following that they've gotten, and it doesn't hurt, man. You've got, Juan Soto, Acuna, and these young kids that are coming up to the big league level really quick and making an impact. And that helps, that helps the game. And, it adds interest to the international market. And that's what makes it fun. As for a draft, who knows? MLB's been talking about a draft for 10 plus years. I was there, I've seen the different mock-ups of it, and, there's always something that happens. Do I think it's going to happen? I think it's more likely now than it's ever been, but it also wouldn't be the first time that MLB says the draft's coming and it doesn't, right? So
Right.
I think a lot of things could happen. Are we planning for it? Sure. I think you're being irresponsible to your organization if you're not planning for it. We've been working on it for a while, but we're also, very cognizant of the fact that it may not happen. So, you just got to be prepared for everything, and that's kind of how we see it. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that like when they came out with the idea that they're thinking of it, just because with the amateur draft and with COVID this year, it being televised, if we get to a point where we even have an international draft and that can be sort of showcased or televised, I think would be really intriguing. It would be really intriguing to a lot of fans, and I think just because I feel like the international market in general is not really sought out, like not sought out until the guys get to the big leagues. And I think it needs, in my opinion, I think that's something that, hopefully MLB, maybe we'll see in the future that, they'll prioritize their time to like, showcasing those guys as well. And with that being said, is there a certain country that you would say in terms of the international market that besides like the DR that you'll see maybe kind of explode in terms of prospects over the next few years?
I would say the one that doesn't get talked about a ton, and they kind of showed what they've got at the last WBC, is Colombia.
Yeah.
You start to see more kids from Colombia. Jorge Alfaro, the catcher with the Marlins. Tyrone Guerrero is throwing like 100. He's a reliever for them. Like they've got some guys. Dilson Herrera. They're not. I'm not gonna say they're on the level of the Dominican, but they almost beat the Dominican Republic in the last WBC, right? With Jose Quintana, Julio Teheran. Like there's some players there that people don't realize that are from Colombia that are making their mark. So I'd say they might be the closest. You've got some kids from the Bahamas coming up now. We've got Trent DeVoe in our system, Deshaun Knowles. Like, we've got a couple of those kids too, Jazz Chisholm, Christian Robinson, like some big kids coming up from the Bahamas. They're just not there yet. They're more at that prospect level. So between Bahamas and Colombia, if I were to guess, what country that isn't known, and this isn't counting like Venezuela, obviously, Dominican and Venezuela and Cuba are well past it. I would say that Colombia and Bahamas are probably the two that the average fan doesn't really know or isn't really aware that there's talent coming out of there. So
yeah, no, I think it's interesting just like for me, like that's somewhere like I'm trying to learn myself more about is the international market. And I think it's interesting to, it's intriguing to hear like what other parts of the world that could possibly be producing players that we just don't know about yet.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see, what the future holds in the international market. But just as we wrap things up here, what's one or two pieces of advice you can give to an up and coming aspiring baseball operations professional, whether it be in the international market or in the domestic market?
Man, I would say find your niche and get really good at it. Um, I would have said when I got in, it was more we were all kind of jack of all trades, master of none, and we learned as we went. But this has become such a niche market now with everything, and departments have grown so much that have an understanding of things, but really have your niche that you are the best at, right? And I think early on, I wanted to do all things, right? So it was kind of like that, right? I wanted to learn R and the analytics side and how do you do all these things. And then the further I got along and talked to people, in the industry, it was more, man, get good at what you're good at. So I've tried to establish myself as one of the you know most, I guess, informed and educated people on the international market, right? I've done it on the club side, I've done it on the MLB side. I've created the rules, I've enforced the rules, now I'm following the rules. So I've tried to make myself as much of an asset in international scouting as anybody else, because that does give you a little bit of job security. But you have to find a way to be an asset, and with so many people trying to get into the game now, if you come in and say, well, I'm pretty good at this, I'm pretty good at that, I'm pretty good at that, and then the next guy comes in, I'm an expert at this, well, give me the expert. We're just looking for experts right now. And that's something that's changed probably over the last 10 years. And I went through it because I thought, oh no, I got to learn everything. And yeah, learn how it works, right? Like learn how the international market works, but it doesn't mean you have to be the expert on it. Be the expert at the domestic side or be the expert in analytics, but know enough about the others, right? Like, I think you mentioned like, R and SQL and that stuff. Like, do I do that stuff? No, but I understand the data, right? Just understand whatever they spit out, understand what it all means and understand how to apply it more than for me. That's how I use it, right? And those guys are invaluable in the same way that they can't do what I do. I can't do what they do, but we work really, really well together, right? Hey, man, draw these things up for me. What are you seeing in this data? What can we use? Like, what are you seeing out of shortstops that sign out of San Pedro to Marquees? Run those numbers for me. What does that look like? What's their WAR in the big league level? What kind of the WRC plus are these guys coming up with? Like that kind of stuff, right? Like I'm not the one running all the statistical models, they are, but then they give me all the data and I'm the one that has to analyze it, right? So I would say just having an understanding of every market, knowing what, when someone says July 2, what does that mean? Understanding that it's a free agent market, understanding that the Dominican and Venezuela are the big markets like that, understanding that kind of stuff. But pick it out, whether it's being bilingual, whether it's being an analytics stud or star, pick your thing and be really good at it. Player development, same thing. I've seen a lot of people getting in on the player development side now with, the drive line boom, right? Rapsodo, understanding how to use those types of things. Seen quite a few people get in the industry, perfecting some of those models, perfecting pitch design, like those things are a need. Find a niche that someone maybe hasn't figured out yet and go that route too. So that's kind of what it's not. Show me why we need you, I guess is what it is. It's no longer, hey, you're a good guy that wants to work in baseball, or you're a smart girl. Okay, no, it's why should we hire you? What do you bring to the table? And if you bring something to the table that's of value, then oh yeah, absolutely. We'll bring you in.
Yeah, definitely. And I couldn't agree with you more along those lines. And I think it's really important for our listeners to understand, because people ask like, oh, how do you get experience with Rapsodo? How do you get experience with this? Or how can I differentiate myself? And
Mm-hmm.
in general terms, I explain to them, but I think it's important. And like you said, be good what you're good at. Because for me, sometimes I kind of go the route of trying to do as much as possible. And sometimes I do too
Mm-hmm.
much. And so I need to take a step back, be like, okay, this is what I'm good at. Let me focus on that, and then let me hone in my skills on things that I can improve on. So I think that's a great way, for us to close this out today. And Giovanni, we can't thank you enough for coming on. We appreciate having you, and hopefully we can have you on soon again.
No, no worries, man. Hopefully it's helpful. As you know, I've always spoken at the winter meetings. Don't know if there will be any winter meetings again this year, but anytime I can try to help out and give back, and if anybody that listens to this and wants to reach out, I try to answer messages as much as I can and be of help. Like we've talked about, I've had people help me along the way, and there were people that didn't need to do that and they did, and it made a big impact on me. So if I can ever give back even just a little bit to someone, I'm always open to do it. So thanks for having me, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah.